Hello guys, namaskaram. So today we have Jess joining us. She has competed in two different sports in world championships and she's also a proud vegan and a remarkable athlete. Initially, she started her career in competitive cheerleading and then transitioned into calisthenics. And through this podcast, you'll get glimpses inside her mindset as to how she thinks through challenges, her approach on relationship with food, and her battle with cancer and how she defeated it and still comes as a strong athlete, pushing the limits of her capability further and further. Personally, I enjoyed this conversation a lot, wherein one gets to understand that how is it that a elite level athlete trains amidst that grind and still keeps pushing without giving up hope or without losing self belief in themselves. Anyhow, you know the standard drill. Take a pen and paper or open any note taking app on the side for you. Write a bunch of awesome notes and do share it in our community in the comment section as well. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now, enough of me talking. You can head over to the podcast. Cheers. So, thank you, Jesse, for joining in. I think after a long time and a lot of technical issues, we have finally made it.
You made
I
it,
think,
yeah.
yeah, great. So, when I was researching about you, I think your whole Instagram in general and specifically the way you live life, I found a sense of this thing within you that you like pushing yourself a lot in a lot
Yeah.
of fields. So, just relating to that, I wanted to understand like what's your core philosophy in life and why do you push yourself so much?
I think I always just love to strive for more. I've always been pretty ambitious and like finding purpose in working towards a goal of some sort.
Hmm.
I'm also just very passionate about having like a long, healthy lifestyle. Like, I don't want to be 75 in a wheelchair. I want to be like 90 and active. And
Hmm.
therefore, I feel like that's just reflected in a lot of my choices on a day-to-day basis where I just want to keep improving and like optimizing as much as I can within a like healthy range.
Hmm. Hmm, hmm. That's interesting. I think you have also competed for two different championships with two
Yeah,
different sports. So,
yeah.
what was the story with that? How does that relate? Do you wanted to explore in general, or just wanted to find a lot of caveats of your life, of your
I think
personality?
that
Yeah.
just comes down to like my character at the end of the day is like I had one passion and with which was the sport of competitive cheerleading. And I just dove into that as like a physical outlet, as a mental health outlet, something that I genuinely loved. It was a really great place to, spend time with friends and move my body and learn what I was physically capable of. And to just like put so much, yeah, like drive and energy into that over 12 years. I competed in the world championships multiple times. I was on Team Canada for 4 years, and I eventually did kind of get to a point of like burning out in that. And then I took about a year off to just kind of like reset my relationship with training, with food, my mental health, and just kind of take a step back. And I just naturally found myself in this position of like wanting to move my body for fun again. And that's when I found the sport of
Hmm.
calisthenics. And I was kind of adapted into a community in Toronto. I was in Ontario at the time, and they kind of took me under their wing and taught
Hmm.
me a lot of
Hmm.
things. And that just kind of drove me from there. I was like, oh, this is my new thing. And
Hmm.
then I took that same passion and energy and drive that I had in the sport of cheerleading and then applied that to this new sport, calisthenics. And then I wound up taking that to the world championships level as well.
Great, great. So I think that you also had suffered from a lot of mental health issues. I think you were very vocal about your depression stories back in your early 20s. And so how does
Yeah,
that tie up exactly? I think preparing for these championships might have also served as an outlet for you to channel your
absolutely.
energy.
It's really interesting because I find it kind of it's like which comes first, the chicken or the egg. It's like you do the thing and then you feel better, or you feel better, so you do the thing.
Hmm.
And I think when you're really, really struggling mental health wise, you're looking for any type of outlet to feel a little bit better. And doing something that kind of has the least resistance to step into it is going to be your number one thing that you want to change that can make you feel a little bit better. So for me, it's always been like physical movement in my body. I know if I go
Hmm.
and put myself upside down and I do a handstand, I'm going to have a little bit of fun with that, and I'm going to get some benefits from it, from building muscle, from just like the endorphins. Sometimes, like if I go for a run, you get endorphins when you go for a run. So it's moving your body is always going to make you feel better. And moving my body is something I genuinely enjoy doing. So for me, if I'm struggling with mental health, that's somewhere I can just like step into this fun component that almost has this like childlike play to it, where I get to move around and enjoy myself and maybe like not think about any of the issues that might be externally impacting my mental health, or just like the fact that, you know, I feel very drained and low outside of that. And it's just kind of like, it's a bit of a distraction, and it's a bit of a healthy coping mechanism, I find, as well. And then in turn, you finish that session and you go home and you feel accomplished and you feel excited. And that's something that I think is huge when you're struggling with mental health.
Hmm. I think that feeling of progress, we all need that on one way or another, on one level, that we can do things. I think that's very important.
And that's why find the thing that has like the least resistance to you, so that
Hmm.
you can feel that sense of, yeah, that purpose, that accomplishment, um, that feeling of like, it's not a huge effort for me to just show up. And once you show up, that's usually the biggest thing, is showing up. Once you show up, then that's,
Hmm.
you know, the opportunities are endless. One of the quotes I like is, the heaviest weight in the gym is the front door. It's
Yeah.
like getting yourself to go do the thing. So if you find something that you
Yeah.
really enjoy doing, then it kind of eliminates that challenge
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
getting started.
I remember one more quote you had written in one of your posts, that be your greatest critic as well as be your greatest cheerleader. So that resonated with me a lot as well, when like you're always pushing. There's that one caveat that you always want to, let's say, break your boundary or break your limitation, and then there's this other thing, okay, that I shouldn't be demotivated to push myself too far. But how that quote came to your life specifically? I think you
So
relate a
yeah,
lot.
that's
Yeah.
that's my thought on
Yeah.
basically anything that you want to go above and beyond with. Like if you want to be at the top of a sport or in your business or job or whatever it is in life, there's three rules to abide by. The first one is to be your own biggest cheerleader. The second one is to be your own biggest critic, and the third one is to never let anyone beat you at either of those things.
Hmm.
So kind of broken down, like the cheerleader one is so important, because at the end of the day, you need to see your potential and believe in yourself more than anybody else does. It
Yeah.
allows you to cheer yourself on if there's, you know, a room full of 100 people or 1,000 people cheering you on, or it allows you to cheer yourself on if you're in the gym or wherever, just working at your craft alone with nobody cheering you on.
Hmm.
And just keeping that in mind as well, it helps to shut out any criticisms you might experience from, you know, outside sources. If someone is saying, oh, they're, you know, she can't do this, she can't do that, it's like, it doesn't matter what they say, because like you believe in yourself, and that's the most important thing. And then it also comes back after the critic part. So the reason why I say be your own biggest critic is because you need to be the most aware of your weaknesses. And like, for example, if I look at the sport of calisthenics, I got into it for the dynamic skills, like all the gymnastic style
Hmm.
skills. And then I was like, oh, I have a big weakness in the statics and strength part. And like, I needed to be very aware of that so that I could work on things. But I can tell you that my opponents were also very aware that those were my weaknesses. So if they have strength in that, then they can play their strengths against my weaknesses. So the more aware that I am of my own weaknesses, the more that I can oversee that my opponents are going to want to play on that. Therefore, I need to strengthen that. I'm going to spend extra time strengthening that. And they think they see my weaknesses, but I see my true weaknesses, and therefore I give myself the most room to be able to improve those, and then come out of the gate really strong in those areas that other people might think are weak. I think probably the hardest part is if you have a blind spot where other people see a weakness that you can't see yourself. So if you're able to be very aware of that, and then the coming back to the cheerleader part is, when you are very aware of those weaknesses, it can pull you down. It can make you feel like you're not good enough. You can compare yourself to other people. You can feel disappointed in yourself. So it comes back to, you need to be your biggest cheerleader so that you can look at yourself and say, this is my weakness, and I know I'm going to overcome it.
Hmm. And that's very interesting. How do you deal with criticism? I'm sure when you're, let's say, walking a very different path, which is very prevalent from the way you live your life very intensely. I'm
Mhm.
sure a lot of people in your vicinity might not be, let's say, very happy or jealous in weird ways, right? So how do you deal with that, with criticism in general?
Um, I just kind of rely on a mindset of that you're never going to hear hate or criticism from someone that's doing better than you. And therefore, if someone feels the need to bring you down, they're projecting based on their own
Mm,
insecurities and what they're feeling, or why they're making an excuse as to like why they can't be where you are, and that triggers something within them. So their response is to hate on it. Um, so my other thought is don't take criticism from people you wouldn't take advice from. So if I am hearing a criticism, I number one say, is this someone who is exactly where I want to be? They know where I'm going. They see my path, and I want to step into their position. And if that's the case, then it's like, okay, I will take that pretty seriously. But if someone is, just getting into the sport, I've got a ton of experience, they don't, and they're pointing out my flaws, I'm like, I don't want to take a step backwards. Therefore, I'm not going to listen to what this person has to say. And again, just kind of remember that it might be more their issue than it is mine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember one post you were mentioning in 2025 wherein you had gone through a lot of phases in life. And I think there was that rumor part also which you had mentioned in one of your posts, which you completely ignored.
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah, I think that's an ideal way as well sometimes to just ignore the voices of a lot of people, which can get to you, right?
I was gonna say with that too is if there's a lot of people talking about you behind your back or anything that way, like if it's someone you care about, have a conversation with them. And otherwise, I find I'm not the type of person to talk about people behind their back and to bring people into my circle that are going to be that way. So if people are going to talk about me behind my back, I say that's none of my business. That's their business, and that's that's at the end of the day, like not the type of person that I want to be associating myself with anyway. I want to be associating with people who, if they hear something about me, can like think critically and be like, oh, actually, that's not her character. Maybe I should talk to her about it instead of talk to other
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. I think people in general just form a lot of quick judgments based on what the group narrative is, rather than just going on
Yeah,
an individual level, as you mentioned, like, critically think that
and
how
that's
is my
something.
experience?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
takes a really specific person to be able to like think critically in that way because I think as humans we're kind of designed to want to fit in for like if you go back in time it's like
yeah,
yeah you have benefits for fitting into your tribe and you
yeah,
have consequences if you stand out and do
yeah,
something different and like you're away from the tribe so
yeah,
um I think it is definitely like you have to really have a lot of strength to be able to criticize what the people around you are doing and be able to take a step outside of that. So yeah, very very normal for people to do for sure.
mm-hmm. No, definitely. I think sometimes I'm sure I remember one story which you mentioned that you had this thing about your abs, like a physique that you wanted. So how was
Okay.
that? Like, how did that started for you specifically? How did you dealt with this insecurity of yours, right? That it's not comfortable in my skin and I want to build this sort of physique.
Honestly, the answer I'm going to give is probably not the answer that most people want to hear, and that's that like I let go of the idea of caring about what I look like, and I just focused on training to feel good and training to see what I was capable of, like skill wise. And within that journey, I wound up with the physique that I had always wanted, which was just a byproduct of training hard and working hard. And I think the lesson in that is just at the end of the day, consistency. Um, because once upon a time, like I was under eating, I was overtraining, I was trying to train specifically so that I could, like be skinny and have abs because that's what we cared
Yeah,
about in year
yeah,
2012 or whatever it was when
yeah, yeah,
Victoria's Secret models were all the rage and everyone just wanted to be like super thin. And at the time I was in the sport of competitive cheerleading. So like we were just constantly wearing these like tiny little outfits with just sports bras or like our competition days where you have crop tops on and little skirts. So it's like, yeah, your body is very much
yeah,
on display for everyone to see. And in a situation where you are surrounded by people with, rock hard abs and it's
yeah,
kind of like almost an expectation in the sport. No one would ever say that, but it's like, the undertones are there. And so when I was so focused on looking a certain way, I would just burn out so easily. And it eventually, that's why part of the reason why I ended up taking a break from sports and I stepped away from cheerleading was just to focus on my mental health around that. And then I started training um, for fun things that I enjoyed doing. And like I
Mm.
said, the path of least resistance, what can you do to be consistent with? And I didn't even realize it at the time. I was super consistent with it because I had fun doing it. And that rolled over into me getting addicted to this sport of like, oh, I can do pull-ups, I can do muscle ups, I can do
Yeah.
handstands, I can work on one arm handstands, and you just had this skill after skill after skill that requires more and more from my body. And in training for those skills, I built muscle. That muscle increased my metabolism, and in turn, I was a lot. My body fat percent, I don't know what the exact number, but I can tell you it's a lot less now than it was once
Yeah.
upon a time when I barely had any muscle on my body. So
Mm.
yeah, it just over the course of time, and I'm talking like I've been in the sport of calisthenics for about 7 years now.
Mm.
Um, so that's yeah, it's consistency, it's showing up regularly and working really hard at things and building that muscle and allowing your body to slowly change over time and allowing just really falling in love with the process, I think is the answer there. If you want your dream physique,
Yeah.
find something that you can do to stick to that you genuinely enjoy, keep showing up and allow it to take time. The time is going to pass anyway, so allow it to take time.
Yeah. Yeah. So how can one be addicted, let's say as a beginner, like as you mentioned, right? You were addicted to progress. How can one be addicted? Let's say if one wants to start as a complete beginner in calisthenics, one cannot do even a single push-up or pull-up for that matter, and one wants to go to like a beast mode like you. I was seeing a lot of reels and I was quite scared when you post all these calluses of your
Oh
hand
yeah,
and
I
things
totally
like that.
want my
Yeah,
things
yeah.
to
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah, I saw that. So I was pretty scared, but like your posts did inspire someone that you're pushing yourself so hard. I'm sure that there's that addiction, that kick you get by pushing yourself so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's not to say it's a linear thing. Like, every
Yeah.
day I don't get excited to go train and
Yeah.
be like, oh, I want to do this because I find, like, in any sport, you tend to have what we call newbie gains. So, in
Yeah.
your first couple of years of the sport, you're going to be learning and acquiring all of these brand new skills that are very attainable for most people to acquire. And then, a couple of years go by and you get more meticulous with the skills that you want to do. So it's like, okay, I don't want to just hold a handstand. I want to be able to press up to a handstand. And that's going to take a
Yeah.
lot more intricate, meticulous training. And as time goes on, like those gains become like slower and slower and few and far in between. Whereas,
Mm.
okay, you want to get a front lever, I'm committing the next two
Yeah.
years to this skill. And so you don't have that immediate feedback of like, oh, 2 months have gone by and I've gained three more skills, which in the beginning it's you get that quite quickly. I find that feedback in the beginning is so important to kind of get you, tied into the sport. Like it's like someone dangling that carrot in front of your face and you're like, oh, I got this, I can do this, I
Mm.
can get another one, I can get another one. And then that carrot keeps getting further and further away. But you at that point you were so invested already in it and you're like, I have a track record of being able to acquire all these skills. So that builds your confidence in being able to continue and be like, okay, maybe those skills took me 3 months to learn. This skill is going to take me a year to learn, but I trust that I can do it because I have a history of doing these skills. And sometimes you don't want to show up. Sometimes you get excited to show up. There's a big area in the middle where it's like really, really boring, but then you make a little bit of progress on it and you're like, okay, wait, I remember why I'm here because it's, and then when you do finally achieve that big skill, like nothing compares to that feeling. Like you just feel so incredibly accomplished. And that's where I find like you kind of get that addiction to the sport.
Mm. Yeah, I think yeah, there's also this philosophy of yours which was very intriguing to me. You mentioned woman in men dominant field.
You
Authentic.
asked something about women in male dominated fields,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
want
That was a tag which you had mentioned in one of your posts. So I think that also inspires this sense that you have that vision of just letting the woman also shine through. I'm sure you might have also faced your own share of criticisms that women can do this XYZ thing and you wanted to prove those people wrong. I think that
to.
also gives a kick.
Yeah, I feel definitely if you feel like you have something to prove, that definitely adds fire to your little spark. It just turns into this big flame of like, no, like it's not just for me at this point. It's for humans in general. It's for
Yeah,
women. It's for men to understand that women also have a space there. Um, yeah, because calisthenics is a very male dominated sport.
yeah,
I moved from Ontario to British Columbia, which is other side of the country,
yeah,
and there was no calisthenics community here. And I love the one in Toronto so much. I was like, we need this, like we really need this. So I decided to start one here. So it's called Calisthenics Vancouver.
yeah,
I established it in the end of 2020, so we're going on our 6th year.
yeah,
Um, and it's grown massively. But because it is such a male dominated sport, I was afraid of not being taken seriously as a woman promoting this. So for the first year or so online, I remained anonymous with the Calisthenics Vancouver Instagram. And the only people that knew who I ran it like was when after they would already show up to a meetup, or if I were to meet them in person and say, hey, which is part of how I bootstrapped it was I would walk
yeah,
up to people in gyms or at parks and be like, hey, you're doing a handstand or you're doing pull-ups. Do you like to train calisthenics? I host meetups if you want to train with the community. We get like, 20 people out. Everyone all trains together and learns from each other. And they're like, yeah, sounds really cool. And these meetups have grown really, really big over the past few years. Now they have kind of like this established, there's like the soul to it, right? So people
yeah,
see California, Vancouver, they're like, this is something really cool. It's established. I want to be a part of it. But to get people on that at the beginning, I was so nervous being a woman that like men would be like, why is there a girl organizing this? Like this
mm,
is like, can women even do pull-ups? That's a big misconception. Can women do muscle ups? Um, I previously worked out of a gym, which this is part of the reason I don't work there anymore, is because there was a board up on the wall at the gym, and it had all of the skills for men and women to share their
mm,
records with. And the men had muscle ups on their side, and the women did not. And I asked the gym owner if we could, and he said no, it's too intimidating for women.
yeah,
So I wrote it on the wall anyway because I'm
yeah,
stubborn. I wrote my name and I wrote 8 because I could do 8 strict muscle ups at the time. And then I never stepped foot in the gym again. So I don't know if it's still there or not. But I was like, this environment needs to change. It needs to be inclusive. And that's just like one story of many. I could probably talk your ear off between
yeah,
me and my, women colleagues and friends in the sport. When we go to competitions, when we go to meetups, just the lack of being taken seriously as an athlete, as a woman. And I do find, which is kind of sad, it changes after people see the skills I can do. They're like, "Oh, I respect you now," as opposed to like, "Oh, like get out of here, little girl," kind of energy.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think there's a lot to prove. One, to men for that, what like women should be accepted into the sport and have a place in the sport. But then two, for women who don't even realize what they're capable of. And I've had women come to me that I've coached that they're like, I didn't think I could even do a pull up a year
mm,
ago, and now I'm training muscle ups, and like that just seemed like such an impossible task. And it's like, no, like you can, like, yeah, it's a little bit tougher for us. We don't have as high testosterone. Our body shape's a little different, so we have a little bit more like dead weight when we are doing upper body things because it's coming. We have more lower
yeah,
body mass than upper, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. And you can look at these really big skills that in the past only men have done, and now there are incredible women executing these skills. So like I show off other women in the sport all
yeah,
the time as much as I can. Stephanie from sorry, I forget where she's from, but Stephanie, she's competed on the world stage pause before, like can one arm planche. And like women can do anything. Just give us the space, give us the time,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we can perform, yeah, just as good as the men can, for sure.
I think it also comes down to conditioning in general, that woman ought to be a certain way, men ought to be a certain way, that sometimes we just place so many self-limiting beliefs on ourselves that we don't even want to try. Which I think
Exactly.
brings me to that point. I see that you have a very builder mindset, that you just want to build things. So initially, when
Mm-hmm.
you were also building this calisthenic community, was that because from that sense of anger towards, let's say, certain XYZ people, or maybe a sense of compassion that you felt towards, let's say, other people, that they can also express their potential. Because I think your philosophy on veganism also ties down to your compassion in general. But yeah, just wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes down to like when I have something to prove, it's more so as myself as an athlete showing up into these spaces. But then the compassion side of it, I think, comes down to more to me when in my career as a coach, rather than an athlete, where I get to work with people one on one and I get to, see people who have a little bit of belief in themselves. And that belief kind of ends here. And I'm like, no, we're going to bring that belief up here. And then we're going to bring it up
Yeah.
here. And just yeah, it's such a beautiful thing to see someone do something that they didn't think that they were capable of doing, and to be able to cheer them on and like help guide them through that journey is yeah, I'm super passionate about
Yeah, that's interesting. What is that one thing that usually you don't show to Instagram? I think 99% of posts usually get filtered out, right? We just show a certain side, which helps us perceive a certain way with our audience, with the community. So I'm sure there might be certain things also which you just hide, which are very, you can say, just something that you don't want to show to the world. Maybe a lot of vulnerability at times, or a lot of self-doubt,
you.
or those types
Asking
of
me to
posts.
share my deepest, darkest secrets with the world right now.
It's okay if you don't want to answer, but
No,
I was
I
just
mean,
very curious. Yeah.
yeah, it definitely it's
Mm,
funny because I feel like Instagram, when people look at your Instagram, they feel like they know you to the core and they know
mm.
every little bit about your life. And like I can share 15 stories in a day, and that's going to be 1% of my day. Like you're not seeing 99% of what I'm doing still. I say a lot of it is very predictable based on those stories. Like you can look at my stories and be like, oh, this is a meal she had. She probably eats pretty healthy. And the answer is yes. Oh, this is a treat she has. She probably has some treats. Yes, I have some treats as well. Or like she trains this way and she's showing, 4 videos from her training, and the other 2 hours of her training probably look the same. The answer is yes. Um, but then there's definitely other things, and I definitely will touch on mental health and say that when I go through struggles, I will share that I'm going through struggles. I don't often share what those struggles are or the depths of it. So that's definitely something and it's not necessarily that like I don't do it for any particular reason, but I just generally prefer to process that alone, not under speculation of other people. I think energy is very powerful. So, like when you're in a very low point, who you allow to, share that energy with you is very, very important. And I don't want to share that energy with like, 25,000 people plus online, because the internet has the ability to push that to 100,000 people, 500,000 people, a million people. And I think that when you're vulnerable like that, it's very important to surround yourself with energy that is predictable and in a really good way. So that's where I share things with my closest friends, with my family, and that's it. And it's not an intentional way to be like, oh, my life is perfect online and then hide the rest. But it's just that's what I feel comfortable with. And I think that's important to be able to have a boundary and not compromise that to
Yeah.
look a certain way online.
So, like your habit of journaling, does that also help you to filter out, let's say, bullshit people from your vicinity, or as you mentioned, like sensing an energy of sorts from people?
Mm-hmm.
So, because from my own personal experience, I use this tool called the Morning Pages by Julia Cameron, wherein you just write three blank pages, like as a stream of consciousness, much more like a tool of journaling. But it just helps me to, let's say, connect with my deepest heart beliefs, sometimes my subconscious beliefs and things like that, and also act
Oh,
as a metric to just understand, like, what type of energy would I kind of receive from the universe and things like that. So, how does that help you, journaling in general, to just filter?
um, yeah, journaling. Most days I just focus on like a morning journal prompt that I have for myself, where I focus on gratitude, I focus on what I want to call in, I focus on actions that I want to take that day, as well as I do a little bit of reflection of something maybe I'm proud of or I love about myself, just to uplift, myself in that sense and reflect and get some, you know, the neurotransmitters in my brain to be strengthened in a positive way, because we tend to think more critically than we do positively. And then I just like to set the tone for the day with my daily journal prompts in the morning. So I just usually do that while I'm having my breakfast, my coffee in the morning. And then evening is optional for me. And it tends to be if I am emotional and going through a lot, it just happens. I journal. I don't ever have to like sit down with the journal and try to force something, because I know that it just comes very naturally. So when, yeah, if I'm going through some things, I tend to have a lot of like downloads, as the spiritual people say.
Yeah.
Just coming to my brain. I'm like, I need to get this out on paper, whether it be like a philosophical thought or something just like emotional that I'm feeling, and just write for pages until it's out of my head. And if I don't do that, I'm not going to fall asleep. So I usually do that at the end.
That's interesting. So how does meditation also help you? Like, I see that you're also into yoga and meditation, at least some parts of it, some poses. So
Yoga,
how
I
does
don't
that?
really do
Yeah.
yoga, but I do try to meditate. I'm not a daily meditation person. I've tried that in the past, and I find I get less out of it when
Hmm.
I try to do it every single day. So I do try to just let it flow a little bit more. If I'm in the sauna alone, I find that's such an ideal meditation spot for me. You know, you're just like sweating it out,
Yeah.
and your brain is just turned off, and then suddenly something super creative will come into your mind. So I've had some like really incredible breakthroughs in terms of like direction in my sport and my life, through meditation. And at other points, I've just used meditation to feel more spiritually connected. Like I would like to also go out into nature if I can find a quiet spot and just focus on, um, just being present, and the trees around me, the river around me, the feeling of oneness, the feeling of connected. And yeah, I think that's a really nice like reset and reminder that like life isn't that serious. Like we're all here for a reason. We don't necessarily know what that reason is, but we're all just part of something so much bigger as well. And just to like be present in that from time to time, I think is super important.
So you had written something very interesting. I just wanted to read that to you. So you had mentioned in one of your posts that what people think is hard, losing plus seeing other get opportunities you work just as hard for. And then you had written, what's actually hard? Facing the death of your ego, falling out of love for your sport, learning your identity without it, the journey to falling in love from a place of surrender, plus training as a vessel of life force, God, and realizing none of it matters.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a journey that most athletes go through, where you get into the sport and it's very ego driven. You show, like we were talking about before, you show up and you have something to prove. Nobody knows my name. I want everybody to know my name, kind of thing. And it's very ego driven. And that's where you're setting yourself up for, yeah, that ego to be crushed by, oh, this person's better than me. And you get into this, challenge of comparison. And that's where a lot of people, these things are hard to go through, absolutely. But then something happens, more so like an injury or falling out of love with the sport. And you really have to return to yourself and understanding your why in the first place, and understanding that you are, in my opinion, I know everyone has different spiritual beliefs as well, but in my opinion, as humans, we are a vessel of God. Like we are the way that the universe is choosing to experience itself. So just being able to like remove yourself from like this ego human, have something to prove, to like, I get to exist as part of, God's vision, as part of like the universe, being able to see what humans are capable of, and like really feeling that within yourself, I find can power, through a lot of really, really tough times. Um, and yeah, like most athletes, if not every single athlete that you see at the elite level, has suffered an injury that probably could have been career ending, but somehow was able to dig deep enough within to push their way through it. I've had that happen twice, where I was like, this, I don't know if I can push through this. And like that humbleness of going and doing the most insane things with your body to this tiny little like move a band around rehab movement and feeling extreme pain. That is something that kind of puts it into perspective, as well as like, I am only human. Why am I here? And channeling that, yeah, that like death of the ego, feeling the universe, spirit, God, whatever, like move through you, because that's your only way forward at that point. The ego doesn't matter, the comparison doesn't matter. It's just, can you keep going? And like the amount of tears that come with this in the most like overwhelming way, like there's sadness of like that version of you that was a younger version and that was ego driven, and letting go of that. And there's that excitement of like, I have the wisdom, the knowledge from all of these years of training, and just knowing that there's something like, there's a reason that you're there and not somewhere else. There's a reason that you're there and not somebody else in your place. And just really trusting that this is the path that you're meant to be on, I think is so empowering. And then realizing none of it matters. Yeah, it's just the cosmic irrelevance of, like, we only get to be here for a small blip in the grand scheme of things. Like, it's not, it seems like such a big deal, and at the same time, like, literally none of it matters, because we're all going to die one day, and 2 generations from now, no one's ever going to remember your name, and you're going to become stardust. It's, life is yours to do with what you want. It's not that serious. Go have fun with it. But to arrive at that point after all of the ego death, all of the finding spirit, and then just getting to that point of like, it's fun, I think, is, yeah, it's a huge journey to go on. There was one experience in competition where I kind of channeled that, and it was Battle of the Bars in 2024. I believe I was the only female battle, and we were the co-main event. And I had so many people. Was one of the competitions that I had the most pressure on me with. So there was 3 battles. There's an opening battle, a co-main event, and a main event. And I was the co-main event with, it was the only female battle. They'd flown my opponent in from Hungary, and this was taking place in LA. I'm in Canada. So I was flown into LA for the competition. And I remember I woke up that day and I was like, I'm never competing again, because I was so stressed out. I had so many nerves. My hands were like physically shaking, and plot twist, I did compete again. But in that moment, I was like, this is not worth it. It's way too much pressure. I had so many eyes on me, people that I had once idolized that had become friends. It was just like this huge, high pressure competition, very, very respectable competition that I was lucky enough to be able to compete at. And I remember getting to the facility. It was set up at the LA Fit Expo, so it's very like high stimulation environment. It's very loud, it's very bright, there's tons of people. And I saw the bar set up, and I just kind of had this calming feeling coming over me. And I'm like, I don't have to put all of this pressure on myself. Like, yes, I'm here with all of these eyes on me, and I want to perform a certain way. I'm going to be sending the biggest skills that I had ever sent in competition before. And I had earned my spot there, so I didn't want to let anybody down. But what I returned to was the thought of, I am a spiritual being that gets to embody this person that has the name Jess, and she likes calisthenics, and today she gets to go do the thing that she loves to do, and that's the end of the story. Like, that's all it was. And that was hands down my favorite competition I had ever done. I gave everything that I had, so I hit all of my skills, all of my hardest skills. I couldn't have done anything harder at that point. And to just like dig really deep within on those moments of like, can I do this? Yes, I can do this. And having that positive self-talk in my head, and then actually following through. At the end, it did not matter to me if I had won or lost that competition, because I knew that I did the absolute best I could do, and I was proud of myself for that. And it was a very tight competition, and at the end of it, I did win, and that was just like the cherry on top for me. So that was hands down my favorite competition. But the thing that got me through the nerves in that was literally stepping away and taking the pressure off myself, and just being like, I'm just a spiritual being, and I get to do this thing, and I'm in this body that can do really cool things, and I love that. So yeah, seeing it as a bit of a separate thing, I was able to take off that pressure And again, just remember that like at the end of the day, nothing matters. 100 years from now, none of us are going to be here anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How can we connect to God? Like, let's say all of us have been through a tough share of experiences, and I was also reading your one of your posts, so kudos to you for defeating cancer. I think that was very inspiring. A similar experience had also happened because I feel our bodies are very intelligent, and as you mentioned, the way we talk to ourselves determines a lot of things, which you had also mentioned in that post that the way you were talking to yourself helped you heal a lot. And I think there's also that element of how well connected we are to God in one way or another to just help us glide through, let's say, certain phases. So how can we do that, like through your experience and understanding?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to that, so it was multiple surgeries that I had to
Yeah,
remove
yeah,
the cancer mole. It was very, like, in terms of, I know how extreme some cancer journeys can be. It was very timid on those side of things, but at the end of the day, it was still a cancer journey. And in those moments, I took a lot of steps away from, you know, running a business. I still ran my business, but just kind of did the bare minimum to get by so I could just create some space for myself to like evaluate things and exist. And I sat a lot with the idea of, well, there's a, 22% chance that this has spread. And if that does spread, there was a 50 to 60% chance of survival rate. And fortunately, it had not spread, and I didn't have to go through immunotherapy, which would have been the next step if it had. Um, but in those moments where you don't know, you have to kind of sit with this is a real possibility. It's a smaller percentage, but it's still a decent percentage.
yeah.
And I sat with, okay, what if my life I do get the worst news and I do get the worst news and my life ends in the next couple of years. Like I had to be okay with that. Um, and I had done, yeah, I had done a handful of, meditative experiences or um, just feeling very spiritually connected in the past to the point where I felt as though um, death isn't necessarily something that's bad or scary, but it's simply returning home to the energy that we all come from in the beginning. So one of the bonuses, like the positives of that, like really challenging experience for me was to just connect a little bit more deeply to like, okay, if this is the end, I do have this safe space to go to. My body is returning, like my body is returning to the earth. My spirit is returning to the energy and the source that it came from. And yeah, I feel like that being able to like have that in the back of my mind when I'm going through tough things is really helpful as well.
Are you excited about, let's say, approaching death? Because I feel that once we have experienced such an experience, it makes us cherish the life that we have, which we usually take for granted, right? Do you feel a difference in the way you live intensely, let's say, previously to that experience and post that experience, the way you
Yeah,
live your
there was
life?
actually a really big turning point in that because as we were talking about before, like mental health has been an issue for me on and off, more so when I was younger, but it still does, I'm human, so it still does impact me from time to time now. But I remember there being a point when I was younger where I did not want to live because life was too much. And it wasn't that I wanted to die, but it was that I just didn't want to live as is, as that life was. It was really painful. And to then get to this point of, okay, that, dying isn't scary, it's not the worst thing that can happen because it's natural and it's not scary. But knowing that I still want to live um, was such a huge contrast. So it used to be I didn't want to die because dying was scary, and I didn't want to live because life was awful. To the point of I'm okay with dying because dying is beautiful and natural, but I really want to keep living because I don't want to die yet. And that contrast definitely has been living in the back of my mind since then of life is so precious, and I want to continue to live life to the fullest as much as possible.
And give my everything that I have within me to the world, that whatever I can contribute, I think from a value perspective, because I think that also gives you I feel that sense of purpose when you see that you're helping all these people with this community and things like that to, let's say, find themselves and explore themselves through, I think, physical mastery
Yeah,
in one way or another.
it's interesting as well because I think as humans we place a lot of pressure on ourselves to be useful, whether that is in like a productive way of society or to give back and help other people. Um, One thing that kind of came to me through that experience is also just knowing that just existing is enough because we aren't always in a season of life where we can give back. And that was one of the things I struggled with as well as when I was dealing with that, just having to say no to a lot of things that I would have otherwise said yes to just because I was emotionally and physically at capacity. And in that, I'm like, I really want to be doing more events with my community. I really want to pick up more clients and give back and teach. And just understanding that like my purpose or my worth and my value is not rooted in what I can do necessarily for other people, but just existing as a human is such a rare and unique experience, and that's literally enough. So it did bring on a lot of self love from that, and I think that when you experience that and believe that, when you do have the capacity to go and give back again and contribute to society in more um, upfront ways, I guess, then you're doing that more authentically and not because like you should or you have to or doing this gives you value, but it's just completely authentic, doing it because you out of love because you want to.
Hmm. Which makes me remember one of your quotes that if you can't flirt with fear, you can't fuck with freedom. I think that was one of your quotes.
Original one. I've definitely reiterated that. I feel like I've heard that from I'm not sure where. Um, yeah, and that I agree. Basically, what that comes down to is, you know, life doesn't exist inside your comfort zone. If you have a little bubble around you always, you're only ever going to know what's in that bubble. And that bubble might look safe for a little while, but that bubble is also a cage. You can exist here, you
Yeah.
can be happy here, you can be safe here, but you're never going to know the freedom outside of that. You're never going to know the thrill of taking a risk and whether or not it pays off. You're never going to have the excitement of a risk paying off. You're never going to have the learning experience of a risk not paying off. It's just going to be boring little bubble. And everything
Yeah.
exciting outside is that's where life is in my opinion, and that's where the freedom is. That's where like all of these like big emotions are, and I think for me that's kind of the point of life, is just to feel.
How do you define freedom? Like, is it living in the most freest way possible? Or
I think it comes down to a feeling of just just being as authentic and real as possible without restriction. Whether that you can look at something like financial freedom and being like, oh well, I can do whatever I want because the cost isn't an issue to me. I can go fly to the other side of the world on a Tuesday because I want to. Like that's like financial freedom, or like drive the vehicle that you want or live in the place that you want. But I also think it's just like a feeling of being able to move your body in the way that you want without restriction. Like in calisthenics, I feel so free when I'm sending a 540 on the bar with 1.5 twists, and you're flying through the air and you catch the bar. Like you feel free. Um, anything that gets the adrenaline rushing, anything that you feel like you've kind of broken outside of that bubble, I think, of comfort, and you just get to do things that light you up and align with who you are without restriction.
if anything, let's say I work for, it disappeared tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then who would you be as a person?
That's okay. So that's something I am struggling with so much right now, completely, honestly, is understanding. And I think most athletes can attest to this because if you've grown up an athlete and you've remained an athlete in adulthood, um, we are going to hit a peak at some point. And as much as I think that, yes, you can be extremely healthy and fit and do incredible things, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like I've seen some really inspiring people do some crazy things later on in life. There is a peak at which where your max is actually going to max out. So there's an age in which I'm not going to be able to do dynamics on the bar anymore. And when you're an athlete, you rely so much on your physical skills and how you show up, how you eat, how you discipline yourself comes back to being an athlete, that it really does become your whole identity. And to be able to step away and say, okay, well, if all of this stuff disappears, who actually are you? And I think I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most uncomfortable thought to sit with. And you're like, okay, who remains in my life? Because I surround myself with a lot of people who are big go-getters, the black sheep, think outside the box, take the road less traveled. And if I'm not that person, do I fit in with these people anymore? And how, yeah, all of your daily choices, all of your daily habits, all of those things give off energy, and that ultimately attracts your world around you. And so if you step away from that, it's really weird to think about. It's very uncomfortable, I think, to think about, okay, what remains?
That's
And
interesting.
I'm still working on it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's interesting. I also feel that if I just tie it to, let's say, a little bit of veganism, I feel that you have that rebellious thing, rebel side going on the side for you. And then I also
Yeah.
see this veganism thing, like, you know how not so positively veganism is looked with the whole gym culture and all the whole muscle building and those sorts of things. So how do you, let's say, push back against that? Because I feel in a way you have just been pushing back against a lot of things just to find your own space. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely been I think maybe that was one of the gates that opened up space for me to be less traditional in other areas as well. Because I've been vegan for just over 9 years now, and I was vegetarian for about 2 years before that. So it was, yeah, roughly about 11 years since I started
Yeah.
like toying with the idea of like cutting out animal products. And I initially tried to go vegan right away, and it did not work. I was needed like there's a learning curve that comes with it. I was like, this is
Yeah.
impossible. And then 2 years go by, and I'm like, actually, it's not impossible. So then I committed to the vegan lifestyle, all of it. And there is so much hate against vegans, and I understand some of it, as in there's also a lot of hate against feminists, and there's a lot of hate against any rights movement, because they are like, if you're at the very extreme of any type of human rights, animal rights movement, you are pushing the boundaries of how 99.9% of people are thinking. And that causes people to feel very uncomfortable. They don't want to self reflect. They don't want to change life because they've already got so much going on in their lives. They don't have a minute to sit down and be like, I'm going to change the entire way I'm eating. Or I'm going to reflect back and go through a lot of therapy because I don't like the way that I've actually shown up and treated this particular group
Hmm.
for, 50 years of
Hmm.
my life. And so the easy thing to do in that is say these people are crazy. And when you are at an extreme, that extreme is going to seem very, very crazy. Whereas I would say that's where a handful, and like hats off to the vegans up there doing the work. But then I think there is also, because of that pushback, the people, the head of that movement are then dealing with their own mental health challenges because they're like, oh my God, 90% of the world hates me. And they're sending all these like so much negative energy to me that now I'm just going to fight back. Screw it. I'm going to get angry. And then they get angry and they fight back. And then people like to point at that. And they
Yeah.
like to say, oh, this person is awful. They're irrational. They're angry all the time. And it's just because they're at the extreme, that's where the eyes go. But I think it's also really interesting because the reputation around those particular people um, gets spread across an entire group. And so if you're talking to someone for the first time and you're saying, "Oh, I'm vegan," you never know how they're going to respond. They're going to be like, "Oh, respect, that's awesome," or they're going to be like, "Oh, dear God, please stay away from me."
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I think same kind of mindset comes back to what we initially talked about, is just like, don't take criticism from people that you wouldn't want to trade places with, and the people that you want to surround yourself with aren't going to be the people that are saying negative things or hating. And it's okay to block people if
Yeah,
people are
yeah,
just.
yeah,
I've had some really insane comments on my Instagram that were unprompted, just going off about how awful vegans are, and I'm like, I literally just said I was vegan for 9 years. This is what I do. I didn't say anything else. And so, if people are coming up at you with negative energy in that sense, like, it's okay to shut it out. It's not normal, I don't think. Like, never in history have we ever been subject to a million people seeing our views and attacking us. And it's just not something I think our brains are designed for. So it's very much okay that if you're getting a lot of hate for something, it doesn't necessarily mean you're right or they're right, but it's okay to shut it out.
yeah. And I think it's also okay some to just learn to exist with all sorts of people, because sometimes I feel that these people have a habit of attacking the extremest thing on a good
Yeah,
spectrum, and they
yeah,
very easily fall to bad things. Let's say if someone is very extreme in drugs and alcohol, they are very comfortable with that. Like that's also
exactly.
an extreme in one way. But
Yeah,
if you tell them about, like, start fixing your life, build a routine, start all these good things, lifting weights, go vegan because it's good for your health and good for the planet as well, there would like be such a massive pushback, which I think ties back to that point which you mentioned, facing the death of your ego. I think a lot of people are unable
mhm.
to do that because
Yeah.
there's just that sense of ego attached, that
And
I just want to live the way.
yeah, I think there's a lot. There's something that you were saying in there is learning how to exist with other people. There's a quote that I liked, and I can't remember it exactly, from Layla Hormozi, and she said that basically, if you're only allowing yourself to learn something from the people you like, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And I think it's a huge skill to be able to listen to someone talk about something, even though you have 12 other things that you would like butt heads on, but being able to learn something from them and take, because I think at the end of the day, we can always find a commonality with someone. Like, I definitely have a friend of mine where we butt heads on a lot of things. Like, we disagree on like the extremes of like masculinity and femininity. We disagree on, like, yeah, veganism versus eating raw meat, but we can have insane conversations when it comes to spirituality. And I'm like, it's actually really interesting, um, to be able to like open your mind up and listen to somebody who can stimulate your mind in one subject, even if you disagree with them on X, Y, and Z. And I think that the world needs a little bit more of that.
And I think that point which you mentioned, the critical thinking point, right? That we're just able to think through, let's say, critically on certain uh, it's the subjects that we're discussing, and not have a very strong bias that, like, the entire person is just throwing
Mhm.
out the baby with the bathwater. I think that's also there.
I think that's also where ego can come into it as well. As like, I remember when I first went vegan, I was like, do I have to embody this particular person now? Like, am I now this like vegan spiritual hippie? And it's funny because I kind of naturally became that anyway. But it was also like, do I have to now like give up the, like, that's a very like soft lifestyle, and then like I have to give up this like hard intensity of discipline and training, and like that's my identity. Like, your identity can be so many things. It doesn't have to fit in like some neat little box that someone is going to just compartmentalize in their brain so that it's comfortable for everyone else. Like, you can do whatever you want in
Mm.
that sense.
What do you think makes a person spiritual?
I think it's just in general openness to openness to love at the end of the day. I think that some of the most spiritual things that we can do is like helping a stranger, um, being in a relationship, having deep connections with your friendships, um, calling your parents if that's, something that
Yeah.
if you're close with your parents and have, yeah, a good relationship with them. Like, um I think that like I truly believe in the theory of oneness, that we are all little like individuals experiencing life individually, but we all come from the same source. So at the end of the day, loving each other, helping each other is one of the biggest spiritual acts. Um, and then I think even like secondary to that is like, can you sit down and meditate or pray and connect with a higher power? I think that comes secondary.
Hmm, that's interesting. And I think you mentioned one very interesting thing, that is love. Do you think self-love sometimes can be spiritual, or can it also
Absolutely.
become, let's say, a form of narcissism in some people? Where do you think that balance lies?
So I would say, yeah, there's definitely two extremes, and I think one is ego driven and one is spiritually driven. Yeah, like the narcissistic, like I'm better than everybody else. That's not love. That is self-aggrandizing. That is holier than thou mindset. Like I'm above everybody else. Versus I think self-love just comes back to, can you look in the mirror and be like, this is an incredible human, this is an incredible spirit, this is, like I'm here for a purpose. um, I'm proud of myself. I give myself grace in those moments where I'm learning and healing. And I think that's more at the root of self-love, as opposed to just thinking like, oh, I'm hot shit. There's
Yeah.
two. One is very deep, one is very shallow.
What do you think your purpose is? I'm sure you might have had a rough sense of idea living through all these experiences in life.
Um, yeah, I think actually it's really interesting because if you're looking more specifically in general at the meaning of life versus like what my individual purpose is, like I think we all have slightly different purposes, but to me, I see the meaning of life is just to experience, to feel, allow yourself like the yin and the yang, like the more happiness you feel, the more pain you feel, the more pain you feel, the more happiness you feel. And allowing that spectrum for all of these different types of emotions and kind of expanding that, and staying alive. I think that's
Yeah.
part of it as well. Um, and I think purpose along, like my purpose within that is to do those things, but maybe my path is on the level of, I don't even have like self discipline and responsibility and just genuinely believing and knowing that the world is a reflection of how we respond to it rather than just pure circumstance. I think that's really important. It's very vague,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
No, no, I
yeah.
think that gets the job done because I think through your conversations you get a rough sense of nuggets of, you can say, practical advice which you are just condensing through your own experiences and just helping one to just grasp these fundamentals, which is really interesting. So what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know right now?
Mm, I would say 20-year-old self, lean into what you love and trust it. In terms of vision and knowing where my life was going, I think that was probably my biggest stress. Um, Not trying to, and this is probably good advice for myself currently as well, just like not trying to control everything and just allow yourself to go with the flow. Focus more on, yeah, how you respond versus the things that happen to you. But yeah, more just like if you lean into what you love, and like naturally I am the person that will always be trying to like improve and learn and grow. That's been a pretty big constant in my life. So just letting the things that light me up at the time be the guide of which direction I want to take, and just trusting that and savoring it as much as possible because time does fly.
Yeah, I think having that attitude of self-love and going with the flow, not being so hard on yourself. I think you mentioned in one of your posts that usually show up with the 150% most of the time. Sometimes I
Mm,
think just having that 100% flow attitude, I think that's the
yeah,
way.
absolutely. And I still struggle with that. Like being hard on yourself is a really tough thing. Especially like even last night I was getting ready to go train and I was not wanting to go because I know the standard that I hold myself to is so high at this point in the season because I am competing in a few months' time that I was afraid of the disappointment I was going to feel when I don't hit that standard or if I don't hit that standard. And I was like, ugh, like it's so stressful going in there having to hit the standard and then like not wanting to disappoint myself. And I think I've definitely loosened up a lot in my ability to not be so hard on myself. But I also just think that's something that comes with time in a sport and the more that you can trust the process because you've seen it unfold in the past, the more that you know that, hey, if I have a hard practice, it's a hard practice and I'm going to be better for it, even though it's hard in the moment. So, yeah, just
No, that makes
not being
sense.
hard on myself and just thinking of the bigger picture, I think, more than the, you know, staring too closely at the painting that you can't see the picture.
That makes sense. So I think just towards the last section. So what usually happens in this section is that my last guest leaves a question for this guest, which is you in this case, and I would
Yeah.
also request you to leave a question for the next guest. So the question that he had left is that are you a manipulator? And if yes, how many times do you manipulate people to just get your own needs served? So that was his question. Yeah.
That was the question. Am I a
Yeah.
manipulator? I was like, am I hearing this correctly? No, not at all. I am such, I want to say even like a people pleaser and like I care so deeply about other people that the concept of like trying to manipulate someone to get what I want is just like I would feel so bad. Like I couldn't honestly do that. I would lose sleep at night. I would be like, you can hate me. I would have to come clean about it. Like I could not do that. Um, and also part of the reason is just when I think about that, it just it's a low vibrating energy. Like it doesn't feel good. It feels forced. And if you have to manipulate someone to get to what you want, then I don't think that the outcome is going to feel good, even if you get what you want. I think that if you're honest and upfront and work hard for what you want and you attract the people in that will help you out, that is going to feel good and get you so much further down the line than trying to like manipulate someone into like doing something for you. At the end of the day, if they want to, they will, and if they don't, they're not the person that's meant to help you get there. And I'm also the type of person like complete opposite end of the spectrum. I have a hard time even asking for help in the first place. So it's just like such a weird thought to me to try to like manipulate someone into doing something. It's really weird.
Great, and I think that makes sense. So that's where the fun is because usually you never know what the question is or who the guest is. But yeah, great.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is. Can you also leave a question for the next guest? We don't know who he or she is, so you can just leave anything.
Okay. I almost got something. What is one small change that you made that had the biggest return on investment?
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a great question, and that would also conclude our podcast. So thank you, Jess, for joining it. It really means a lot to me that you took out the time despite all our
Yeah, no, I'm
technical
really
difficulties.
made it happen. I was good. I really enjoyed that conversation. So thank you for having me.
So that was the podcast, guys. Thanks for watching, and do write what guests or what topics would you like me to talk upon in this podcast series. We do have a bunch of awesome guests coming, but you stay connected. And until then, this is Debu Pindra from Debu Dastak signing off. Cheers.